Hello, and welcome to KeyForge Coffee Break. My name is Cameron Weaver, and you may know me from Absolute BSS, a podcast I do with my friends about Bandai Namco's trading card game Battle Spirit Saga. If you're in the Discord and this is how you found this training video, welcome. I'm excited to start a small mini series about my favorite card game, KeyForge. And I've been streaming KeyForge online for a number of years now. I've played in a lot of high level tournaments. I play it casually. I play it competitively. I just eat, sleep, breathe KeyForge. And I want as many people to get into this game with me as possible. And that's kind of the goal with card games, right? You want to foster a community and have other people playing the game that you love. And KeyForge has quite a storied history. But it is alive and well. The 7th set of KeyForge is coming out soon. And what better time to jump into a game that is evergreen? And what I mean by that is at this point in time, October 2nd, 2023 is when I'm recording this. Every KeyForge set is playable. And every KeyForge set can play against each other in any setting. Kitchen table, competitive, etc. So there's a lot of ways to play KeyForge. There's a lot of decks of KeyForge out there, and that can be a little overwhelming, you know, for as unique of a game as KeyForge is. That creates a low barrier of entry. However, with how complex and deep the game of KeyForge is, it can feel overwhelming once you get into it or once you start. So I just want to make a quick start guide, a few 30-minute videos here and there at first to introduce people to KeyForge, because when I'm streaming, my friends will come in who don't play the game and they're just there to, support me and hang out with me. But they don't know what I'm doing on the screen. They don't know what KeyForge is. So it's been long overdue that I make some beginner KeyForge content. So this first episode is just going to be, what is KeyForge? How do you play it? And just the very bare minimum understanding of what this game is and how you can get started. It's the easiest game to pick up. It is incredible because every deck is built for you. Like most other card games, you are constructing decks. You're looking at limit lists. You're looking at banned lists. I'm looking at you, Absolute BSS. I'm looking at you, Battle Spirits, who just had 3 cards banned and 1 card limited. In most formats of KeyForge, you don't have that. I'll get to Alliance at some point further down the road. That is an organized play format. But for now, we're just looking at KeyForge at its core. Every deck is unique. It is built in an algorithm so that there are no duplicate decks. So every time you open a deck of KeyForge or buy one on the secondary market, that's the one of one. That is the only deck with this list of 36 cards in it. So for example, my deck here on the screen, this is my very first KeyForge deck I ever opened. It's called Delphinus Dewdairy Raconteur. So not only are all the names unique, but this list of 36 cards is unique. Each set pulls from a group of cards, and they are rated at common, uncommon, or rarity. And there's an algorithm that tweaks it so that certain cards always show up with other cards. It's very, very fun. I won't get into all the specifics of that right now, but what you need to know is that when you buy a KeyForge deck, you are not changing cards in it. This is your deck. Some people may not like that. If you're coming from a Magic the Gathering background, you like to construct a deck. You like to spend all those hours putting decks together and researching the meta, and that's cool. But with this game, you don't have to do that. Instead, what you're doing is picking up a deck, playing it over and over, and trying to figure out how to make it do the best that it can. You are given the engine, and now you have to get the most power out of it. And I think that's really refreshing. It's fun. I also play constructed deck games. I love building decks and being goofy and stuff like that, but there is something so fun and just wild, and maybe it just mixes with the randomness of this game, but opening a deck ready to go and just being able to play for $10 is amazing. It's a great feeling. So I encourage you just to start there. Grab a buddy, grab a deck. Better yet, talk to a friend who's already into KeyForge. I'm sure they have decks for you. Pop open a couple of sealed decks, play the game. It's very, very fun. So the other thing that you're going to see here on these decks in the way that this algorithm pulls in cards for your deck, each set of KeyForge has 7 houses. The houses are important for the gameplay, as well as how your deck is being made up. So there are 7 houses per set, and each deck has 3 of those houses mixed together. 12 cards from each of those 3 houses makes your 36 card deck. So for example, in this set, this is the first set, a deck from the first set, Call of the Archons. My 3 houses are Logos, Mars, and Sanctum. Now, I'll do a video deep diving each set and their house makeup and what their houses want to do, and try to tie it into other games like Magic the Gathering or Battle Spirit Saga or Digimon, so you can quickly kind of know in your head what houses you're looking for. That might help when you're opening decks to know where to start. So a very brief rundown. Logos likes to draw. They're very efficient. And in this game, when you run out of cards in your deck, you don't lose. You just shuffle your discard pile back and create a new deck and keep going. So Logos lets you see a lot of cards typically. Logos is very fun for drawing, and it's also very fun for a mechanic in this game called archiving, which is basically setting cards aside later to pull from, and again, increasing that efficiency. You draw up cards at the end of your turn. So if you are calling Logos and using Logos cards to draw and put cards away, you're going to see more cards through your deck. So typically, whenever Logos is in a set, you're looking for Logos. Mars is very fun. Mars has found its legs in more recent sets in the game. In this first set, it's kind of a crapshoot. You don't know what you're going to get with Mars. They're a wild card. They deal with the stun mechanic. They deal with capture. They deal with pretty much everything. They're a jack of all trades, but they don't play well with the other houses. And I'll explain that in a future video as well. But basically, Mars are the wild cards. They're fun. They're goofy. They're these little green men, and they have a wide variety of abilities. And again, they're not as good in the early sets. I happen to really like this Mars list in my first deck, but it might be biased because it's my first deck. And then Sanctum. These creatures are knights and spirits, very valiant, white in Magic. They can go wide. They stick to the board pretty well. They're powerful. And they deal with a mechanic called capturing, which I'll get to soon. But basically what this deck likes to do is archive cards, move through the deck, and stall your opponent. And now we're going to get into what all of that means with how to play KeyForge. So, you and your buddy, if you're both new to the game, you both put $10 into the game, you might have just cracked the best deck ever discovered. That's pretty cool too, right? Because you're not building your decks. Remember, any deck from any set is viable, and they're already printed and they're just waiting to be discovered. That's part of the fun of KeyForge. That's why players like me have bulk collections of these decks, because we're searching for the next big thing. But also, it's just fun to play sealed. So you and a buddy, $10 in each, you both have a deck. You're ready to play KeyForge. You both have a unique deck of 36 cards. Doesn't matter which set you bought, they can play against each other. Obviously, there's going to be some power imbalances just with the way it's a big card pool. There's 6 sets of cards right now, a 7th one on the way. But at its core, any KeyForge deck can play any KeyForge deck. So in your deck of 36 cards, there are going to be 4 types of cards. The first one, creatures. So this is a Staunch Knight. This is a Sanctum creature. So in the top left corner of the card, that is that card's house. That's how you identify it. In KeyForge, at the start of each turn, you call one of your 3 houses, and then you can play cards from your hand that are of that house, or use cards already in play of that house. There's no mana system. There's no resource system. It's all based on what house you call at the beginning of each turn. Therefore, when you are deciding what house to call on your turn, you're either calling a house that you have a lot of cards in your hand that you want to get out onto the field so you can see more cards, or you're calling a house that you have a lot of cards already on the field and you want to start using them. Cards have a summoning sickness. They can't be used right away when they come into play. So creatures and artifacts, which I'll get to, come into play, rotated 90 degrees, exhausted, or tapped. At the end of your turn, when you draw up, you also ready up anything that came into play or that was used that turn, and they're ready to go for the next turn. So, creatures come into play exhausted, like this Staunch Knight. The power is the number on the left in the middle there, the red number there. So Staunch Knight has a power of 4. That means when Staunch Knight fights, it deals 4 damage. If Staunch Knight ever has 4 or more damage on it, it dies and moves to the discard pile. If Staunch Knight has damage on it, it does not reduce how much damage he deals. So, for example, if Staunch Knight has 4 power and fights something that deals 3 damage back to him, he only needs 1 more hit to die, but next time he fights, he can still deal 4 damage. And then the number on the right there is a creature's armor. Not all creatures have armor, but Sanctum creatures typically do. Armor regenerates at the start of every turn. So that means every turn Staunch Knight starts with 2 armor. That armor soaks up any damage that would come Staunch Knight's way for that turn, up to 2 in this case. So if Staunch Knight, a 4/2, fights a creature that has 5 power, no armor, Staunch Knight deals 4 total damage to that creature. That creature is still alive, but only needs 1 more damage to die. That creature deals 5 damage back to Staunch Knight. Staunch Knight soaks up 2 of that damage with armor, takes 3 more, is still alive. And then at the beginning of the next turn, Staunch Knight gets that 2 armor back, but still has the 3 damage on it. The opposing creature still has the 4 damage on it. If those creatures fought again, they would kill each other because the 5 power creature would deal 3 more damage to Staunch Knight after the armor. Staunch Knight still deals 4 damage back to that creature. They're both dead. So that's how damage works, health and power works in this game. The power is always what it does. And in this case, that's 4. Then you have the name there in the middle, the type of card that it is, creature. And then you have these traits right underneath that. Traits they can come into play. Some cards will reference a creature's trait. Like, for instance, Staunch Knight is a human and a knight. There are some abilities that hurt just specifically humans. Or there are some abilities that buff your knights on your field. So that's what those traits are for. And then finally, there's a text box. And that is for abilities. There's a wide variety of abilities that creatures have. There are keywords, there are passive abilities, and so on. So Staunch Knight's ability here is passive, so it's always on. And it says Staunch Knight gets +2 power while it is on a flank. So when you play creatures in this game, they come in and they have to go on one of 2 sides, either the left side or the right side, unless they have a keyword called deploy, which we won't get into right now. So, for example, if I want to play Commander Remiel, and I already have Staunch Knight and Doom of the Martyr here, Remiel would have to come in on the left or the right. What a flank is the furthest card on the left or right. So, before I play Remiel, if Staunch Knight is here on the left, it actually is a 6-powered creature with 2 armor. But as soon as Remiel comes down here, Staunch Knight loses that ability because it is no longer on a flank. So if Staunch Knight was on the flank and had 6 power, but had 5 damage on it, and I brought in Remiel here, Staunch Knight would die because it no longer has 6 power, but it has 5 damage, which is more than 4. So you have to be careful with your positioning of your creatures and just sequencing, playing your cards over your turn. There's no order in what you do anything on your turn. You can play actions, artifacts, fight with creatures, reap with creatures, do whatever you want on a turn in whatever order until you are done. But again, it's all locked behind whatever house you're choosing at the time. So that's what creatures look like. One more example here. On Doom of the Martyr, Duma has 3 power, no armor. That's what that little symbol means. Duma has a destroyed effect. So at any time when Duma is destroyed and sent from the field to the discard pile, you get to activate that destroyed effect. And then some cards have a flavor text there at the bottom. They also tell you who illustrated the card, their set number, and their rarity. So this card is from Call of the Archons. It's number 242, and it is a rare. That's what the star symbol means. And before I go on, I didn't even tell you the object of the game. So yeah, there's creatures, just like everything else. There are creatures, they fight. That's really cool, right? But this is not a game about fighting. You're not fighting to lower your opponent's life points down to anything. There are no life points. Instead, KeyForge is a game about tempo. It is a race. A lot of people liken it to Mario Kart, where you are trying to get that final lap before your opponents, and they might be pulling ahead of you, so you have to throw a red shell their way. Or you have to really speed up right now and hope that it's enough, and that hope that they don't have the mile around shell that's going to knock you down. Okay? That's going to make more sense here in a second. The point of KeyForge is to collect aember. Aember is a substance on the Crucible that is very valuable, and it is used by the Archons, which is your individual deck, to forge keys to open vaults full of mysteries and powers. So in this game, you're using creatures, playing actions, and trying to race ahead to collect more aember than your opponent. At the start of your turn, if you have enough aember to forge a key, which the cost starts at 6, then you spend all that aember in your pool, and you forge a key. The first player to forge their 3rd key immediately wins the game. So it's not life totals. It's not about fighting. Fighting can help you slow your opponent down because, again, if you have board and you want to continue to keep that board presence, you're going to use creatures to fight, or you're going to use actions to wipe out your opponent's creatures. And then once there's nothing else to do, each creature has the ability to reap. So on your turn, let's say we called Sanctum and I have these 2 creatures out and they're ready to go. Nothing on my opponent's board. I'm going to reap with Staunch Knight. That means I exhaust it. This is what it does. It gets me 1 aember. Doom of the Martyr. No one to fight. Going to reap. Now I have 2 aember. So let's move on to actions for now. Let's say I'm still in Sanctum and I want to play this action card. So action cards, again, have the identifier in the top left. That's the house that this card belongs to. It will read its name and tell you that it's an action. And then it has its ability text. So play means when you play this card, resolve as much of the card as you can, and then immediately move it to your discard pile. So inspiration says, ready and use a friendly creature. So when cards are vertical, they are ready. When they're tapped, they're exhausted. What inspiration says is you can ready and use a friendly creature. So in this example, we're in Sanctum. We already used these 2. I can drop in inspiration, ready Staunch Knight, and use it again to reap or to fight if there was something to fight. So in this case, sequencing, you could get the most out of Staunch Knight. You can reap with it first, throw down inspiration, ready it, fight something. So you're not only gaining an aember, but you're limiting your opponent's options. Inspiration also does something very fun with creatures out of house. You do as much of the card as you can in the order that you can. So let's say it's my Sanctum turn. I got 2 creatures on the board, and I've got this inspiration in my hand. I call Sanctum. I reap twice. But instead of using another one of my Sanctum creatures, I'm going to play Inspiration to ready and use a friendly creature. Grabberjammer is a friendly creature. I can't use Grabberjammer normally because this is a Mars card. However, Inspiration says ready and use a friendly creature. Grabber Jammer is already ready, so that part's done. But then I can use it because that's what the card says. So I can reap with Grabber Jammer, gain an Ember, and then I can activate Grabber Jammer's reap ability. So all creatures can be used to reap. However, some creatures have what's called an after reap ability. So you'll see it there in bold. This creature has after fight or after reap, capture 1 Ember. Capture is a really fun mechanic in this game. So let's say on this turn, the reason I even called Sanctum to use Grabber Jammer with Inspiration was because my opponent was in check. At the end of their turn, they had 6 Ember. They only forge at the start of their turn, so that gives me a chance to slow them down before they forge their key. So, I just reaped with Grabber Jammer. I got my 6th Ember. Grabber Jammer then says, reap, capture 1 Ember. Captured Ember comes from your opponent's pool. So you take that Ember and put it on top of the creature that captured it. When this creature would leave play, all that Ember on it goes back to your opponent's pool. But for now, my opponent can't use that Ember as if it were in their pool, meaning they will not forge at the start of their turn, because Grabber Jammer, whose flavor text is mine, and I love that, captured an Ember. So that's the end of the turn. I would declare check, as I have 6 Ember, and that is the current cost to forge a key. I ready my creatures, and I draw cards until I have 6 in my hand. And now I'm getting ready for the next turn. So in KeyForge, there's no flash windows. There's no quick spells. There's no player interaction while your opponent is doing things. You each take turns progressing and messing with your opponent's tempo and trying to take them off of keys, off of check, trying to keep them from forging their 3rd key before you. And we've looked at actions now and creatures on how to do that. So let's just move to my next turn, let's say. And we're going to start at the very beginning by spending 6 Ember and forging our first key. We're ahead. So now, on the board, we have 2 Sanctum cards and a Mars card. In our hand, though, we have a lot of logos. So let's look at that. This is an action card, so we're just going to go ahead and play that. Effervescent Principle comes in. It's an action. Play. Each player loses half their Ember, rounding down the loss. Gain 1 chain. So there's a lot going on here that we don't know about yet. First of all, this is an action, so you do as much of it as you can. Each player loses half their Ember, rounding down the loss. We no longer have any Ember, so we don't lose any. My opponent, though, has 5. So 2.5 Ember rounded down means they lose 2 Ember. Gone. Just gone. Right out of their pool, it's gone. So that's good. You want to keep your opponent's Ember pool low. And cards like Effervescent Principle can help you do that. Then we're going to gain 1 chain. Chains are probably the trickiest part to wrap your head around in this game, just because it's such a strange mechanic, but it is effective. So cards like Effervescent Principle can be very, very powerful. Since there is no resource cost in this game, you know, it's about maybe you held on to this card for this right moment, or you really need to flip the script. But there's going to be a little bit of a downside, and that's what chains are. Chains say, at the end of your turn when you are drawing up your cards, if you have a certain amount of chains, you're going to draw less cards. So I'll get to that in a minute. So just for now, know that Effervescent Principle cut my opponent's Ember down in half. I gained a chain. So we're going to continue our turn here with this action card, Lab Work. So again, actions you just play, you resolve them from the top down as much of the card as you can, and then it goes to the discard pile. So underneath the house identifier symbol, we see a little Ember icon. And what that means is, when you play an action with an Ember icon or a creature with an Ember icon, any card with an Ember icon, you immediately gain that much ember. So not only can you gain ember by reaping with your creatures, but you can get them just from playing cards. So lab work here gives us an ember pip. We're going to put that into our pool before anything else. Then it says play, archive a card. This is your archive. At the start of your turn, when you call a house, you then are able to pick up every card in your archive and add it to your hand. So this does a lot as far as progressing your tempo in this game. Archiving a card means you pick a card from your hand and place it face down into your archive for later. So we put Champion Tabris, who is a Sanctum creature. We can't play that card this turn anyway, so we're just going to stock her away. And when we draw up at the end of our turn, that means we're drawing an extra card. We got an Ember off of the card, and Tabris is pretty much safe for a while until we're ready to use her. So then lab work goes to the discard pile. Finally, we have an artifact, as you can see under the name here of Library of Babel. Artifacts, like creatures, come into play exhausted. However, on future turns, when we are in House Logos, we can use its action ability. If a card has an action ability, that means while you're in that house, you can choose to exhaust it to perform its action ability. So Library of Babel on future turns lets us tap it and draw a card. So it's exhausted for now, but that'll come into play later. So that's it. That's the end of our turn. We ready Library of Babel, and now we're going to draw up cards. We have one chain, meaning instead of drawing up to our normal hand limit of 6, we draw one less. When you have 1 to 6 chains, you draw one less card. 7 to 12 chains, it's 2 less cards. 13 to 18 chains is 3 less cards. And anything more than that is 4 less cards. So in this instance, we would draw 3 cards for a total of 5, and we would then lose 1 chain. So at the end of our next turn, we'll draw up to 6. All right. The final thing we need to talk about here, the 4th type of card, is upgrades. So let's fast forward again. Say we're back into Mars. First of all, we have another artifact. We're going to throw that down for later. And this artifact has an Ember Pip. So we're going to get that. Even though the card comes in exhausted, we still get the Ember Pip just for playing it. And now we have an upgrade. So upgrades, they'll tell you they're an upgrade under their name. Some upgrades have Ember icons like this one. So we'll get an Ember there. Upgrades can be attached to any creature. Does not have to match house. Does not have to be your own creature. There are some upgrades that you want to put on your opponent's creatures. This one, though, is just good. And you don't want it on other creatures. Also, let's pretend we played Grabber Jammer over here because I went through all that talk about flank creatures. And we should keep Staunch Knight on the flank. So, upgrades come in underneath your creatures. So we're going to attach Jammer Pack to Staunch Knight. So as long as Staunch Knight is in play, Jammer Pack is equipped to it. When Staunch Knight would leave play, so does Jammer Pack. Jammer Pack says this creature gains your opponent's keys cost +2. So that's a passive ability. So as long as Jammer Pack is in play and attached to my Staunch Knight, my opponent's key cost is now increased by 2, which I didn't go over with Grabber Jammer, but Grabber Jammer also says your opponent's keys cost +1. These key costing abilities do stack, meaning if Grabber Jammer and Jammer Pack are in play at the same time like they are right here, my opponent would need to have 9 Ember in their pool at the start of their turn to forge 1 key. So if you're my opponent, you now have targets. You want to get rid of Grabber Jammer. You want to get rid of the Staunch Knight's Jammer Pack because you're spending more money to forge keys while I am just bursting ahead, 1 key up, ready to go. And that is basically the fundamentals of KeyForge. You continue this back and forth, calling a house, playing cards from your hand, and using them to fight, reap, capture, steal. We'll get into stealing. And until one player forges their 3rd key. So I hope that that's a nice, succinct, quick visual guide to what your cards do in a deck. It's really fun that my first deck actually had all 4 types of cards, and some fun little abilities there. But that's the game of KeyForge. It's a lot different, and on the surface, right, it's pretty simple, but there's a lot of complexities. There's a ton of fun and fascinating weird interactions that happen in every game, because each deck is different. Each deck, you're going to draw different cards each game, so even playing the same 2 decks against each other over and over again is always going to feel different. And that's just another strength of the game, I think. So that's going to do it for this first episode of KeyForge Coffee Break. We've got more tutorial videos, new player guides, and I'm going to link some helpful resources for you. So first of all, keyforging.com, which is the new landing page for the company that now owns KeyForge, Ghost Galaxy. The KeyForge Master Vault, where you can search all of the decks that have been registered so far, which is over 3 million decks. And the Archon Arcana new player guide. My favorite thing about KeyForge, hands down, is the community that plays it. They are incredible. I'm so happy to be a part of it. They have hosted online leagues. They've made podcasts, YouTube videos, quick start guides. You know, I'm just another one. There's so many resources out there for you to explore, to learn this game, and love this game as much as I do, and a whole bunch of other people. I will also link the Crucible, which is another fan-made project that allows you to play KeyForge in your browser. So if you're ever wanting to play the game, I've got decks for you. Just hit me up on our Discord, the Absolute BSS Absolute BSS Discord. There's a KeyForge tab in there now. It's been a little quiet, but I'm hoping to change that soon. So thank you once again for watching this video. If you made it to the end, hit me up on the Discord. The link to the Discord will also be in this video's description. Let's play some KeyForge, and stay tuned for more tutorial videos, how to pick out your deck, how to find which house fits with your playstyle the most, and just quick little looks at all of the different houses that you can expect to find in the world of KeyForge, because it's a really, really fun original IP, and it's just a damn good game. All right, we'll catch you next time. Thank you for joining me on KeyForge Coffee Break. So long.